A honeybee lands at the entrance of a hive after flying nearly 5 kilometers across open countryside. She walks into total darkness, and then, on a vertical wall of wax surrounded by thousands of bodies, she begins to dance. A short run forward, her abdomen shaking violently. A loop to the left, the same run again. A loop to the right. Over and over, a figure of 8 traced in the blackness. Within minutes, bees who have never left the hive that day launch into the air, fly in a straight line across fields they have never seen, and land on the exact flowers she found. No map, no light, no guide, just a dance. For centuries, nobody had any idea this was happening, and when someone finally worked it out, most of the scientific world simply refused to believe him. I'm Nathan Wild. I've spent years crouched beside hives with a magnifying glass and a notebook, trying to eavesdrop on a conversation that happens in complete darkness in a language made of movement. And I can tell you honestly, nothing in the insect world has ever unsettled me quite like this. Because what a honeybee performs on that comb is not excitement, it is not instinct spilling over, it is information. Precise, measurable, translatable information about a place that exists somewhere out in the world and coded into the body of an animal with a brain the size of a grass seed. The man who cracked it was an Austrian named Karl von Frisch. He began watching bees in the years after the First World War, and at first he only noticed that returning foragers moved in strange circles on the comb and that their sisters became agitated and left. He assumed the smell of the flowers was the message. It seemed obvious.
The bee comes home carrying the perfume of the meadow, and the others simply go looking for that perfume. But something didn't add up. Bees were arriving at feeding stations too far away, too quickly, too accurately for a scent trail to explain it. So von Frisch did what all great naturalists do. He stopped assuming and started watching. For years, marking individual bees with tiny dots of paint, following them, recording hour after hour the exact geometry of their movements. And slowly, an impossible pattern emerged. The straight part of the dance, the part where the bee shakes her abdomen from side to side, isn't decoration, it's an arrow. The angle of that run, measured against straight up on the vertical comb, corresponds precisely to the angle of the food source relative to the sun. Straight up means fly directly towards the sun. 60 degrees to the right of vertical means fly 60 degrees to the right of the sun. The bee has taken the sky and translated it into gravity. Personally, I find that almost impossible to sit with calmly. This is an insect performing a coordinate transformation. She is converting a solar bearing into a gravitational one, in the dark, from memory, while walking on a wall. And there's more. The duration of that waggling run encodes distance. The longer she waggles, the further the flowers. And she doesn't measure it in meters. She measures it in effort, in the flow of the landscape past her eyes. Roughly speaking, 1 extra second of waggling means something close to another kilometer of flight. If she's found something close to home, she doesn't bother with the figure of 8 at all. She simply runs in tight circles, a round dance, which says, it's near, go out and search.
Now, if you're enjoying this expedition into a world most people walk past every single day, come with me. Subscribe, and you'll be there for the next descent into the miniature jungle beneath our feet, because I promise you, we have barely scratched the surface of what these creatures are hiding. Here is the part that troubled me for a long time. The dance happens in the dark, total darkness. The bees crowding around the dancer cannot see her, so what exactly are they receiving? They press in close, antennae outstretched, touching her body as she vibrates. They feel the air. Each waggle produces tiny jets of air and a buzzing pulse of around 250 vibrations per second, and the followers detect those pulses with organs in their antennae sensitive enough to register air movements smaller than the width of the hair. They are not watching a dance, they are reading it with their whole bodies. In the 1990s, a Danish researcher named Axel Mikkelsen built something extraordinary to test this, a mechanical bee, a small brass model coated in wax that could be programmed to waggle at any angle for any duration inside a real hive. And the bees followed it. They took the robot's instructions and flew to places no real bee had ever told them about. The code had been broken, and now it could be spoken back. But not everyone accepted it, and this is where the story gets genuinely uncomfortable. Von Frisch received a Nobel Prize in 1973 for this work, And yet, an American scientist named Adrian Wenner spent decades arguing, with real evidence, that the dance was largely irrelevant, that bees found food by odor alone, and that the dance...
It became one of the most bitter arguments in the history of animal behavior. And Wenner's objection had teeth because nobody had ever actually watched a recruited bee fly. Everyone had only seen where they arrived. The argument was finally settled in 2005 when a team led by Joe Riley glued tiny radar transponders to the backs of individual bees and tracked their flight paths from the hive. And there it was. The recruits flew out on the vector the dance had specified, the correct direction, the correct distance. Then, arriving at the empty air where the message had pointed them, they began casting about in loops, searching for the scent. Both scientists had been half right, but the dance was real, and it was a map. Sincerely, this is one of the discoveries that changed how I see the natural world. Because it means that inside that hive, an insect is describing a location to another insect. That is symbolic communication. It is, by any reasonable definition, a language. And the deeper you go, the stranger it becomes. The sun moves across the sky, so a message about a solar angle should expire within minutes. Yet bees trapped inside the hive, unable to see the sky, will keep dancing for hours through the night, slowly rotating the angle of their waggle runs to compensate for where the sun would be if they could see it. They are correcting for the rotation of the Earth, from inside a dark box. And when they finally do fly out, on an overcast day when the sun is hidden behind cloud, they can still find their bearing, because bees see polarized light. A single patch of blue sky is enough to tell them where the sun is standing. Then there's the question of how a bee knows how far she has traveled. She has no odometer.
It turns out she counts the world flowing past her eyes. Experiments in which bees were made to fly down narrow tunnels, with the walls painted in patterns that rushed past close to their heads, produced bees who came home and reported enormous distances, though they had flown only a few meters. Their sense of distance is a sense of how much scenery has streamed by. Fly across a bare, featureless lake, and a bee will underestimate the journey. Her map is written in visual flow. And the dance isn't the only word in the vocabulary. There is a tremble dance, discovered by Thomas Seeley, performed by a forager who arrives home with a full load and finds nobody available to unload her. Her shuddering, wandering movement is a message to the colony that the bottleneck is inside, not outside. Stop recruiting, start processing. And there is something far darker, a stop signal. A returning bee will sometimes headbutt a dancer and deliver a short vibrational pulse, and if she receives enough of them, the dancer falls silent. Researchers found that bees who have been attacked at a flower patch.
And the better the cavity, the longer and more vigorously the scout dances for it. Other scouts go and inspect the site themselves, and if they agree, they come back and dance for it too. Poor sites lose their advocates and fall silent. Good sites accumulate them. And at some point, when enough scouts are gathered at one single location, a threshold is crossed, and the entire swarm rises into the air and flies as one body to a place that almost none of them have ever seen. 10,000 individuals, no leader, making a life or death decision through debate. And the decision is usually the right one. The more I learn about these animals, and I mean this sincerely, the more I suspect we have badly misunderstood what a small brain is truly capable of. There are still things we cannot explain. Why the dances of some bee races encode distance differently, as though they speak in dialects, so that a bee raised in one region can misread the message of a bee raised in another and fly too far or not far enough. Why the dance is imprecise, scattering recruits over an area rather than a point, and whether that scatter is a flaw or a deliberate strategy for finding whole meadows instead of single flowers. Why colonies in some environments seem to rely on the dance heavily and others barely at all. And every time I lift the lid of a hive and feel that low, warm roar rise out of the dark, I think about what is actually happening in there. Thousands of conversations, locations being described, warnings being issued, arguments being settled, a world being mapped, discussed, and decided upon in a language made entirely of movement by an animal most people would swat without a second thought. Now, there's another side to these creatures. Because the same insect capable of all this carries a weapon that kills her the moment she uses it. And the reason why is one of the strangest evolutionary bargains I have ever come across. Come with me and let's find out why a bee dies when she stings.